It was always cold at dawn on the factory floor. Even in mid-June with Tokyo sticky and humming outside, the pre-sun chills seeped in through the loading dock's dented aluminum walls and settled into my bones. The foreman's voice was sharp as a splice cutting through sleepy chatter. "Yamada, you're done, they've pulled your shift." He didn't come up to me directly. The announcement was tossed out with all the care of flicking ash from a cigarette. I stood there, hands braced on the conveyor belt, aware of every other pair of eyes on me. Yamada, the dreamer, dismissed again. I lifted off my gloves and stuffed them in my pocket. I had known it was coming. Orders were down. And every time numbers got low, I was the first to be called up and the first chopped off. Even after 2 years, I was still the odd one out, the university dropout who talked too much about aperture and film grain. The others snickered softly, but no one was cruel enough to do it to my face. They'd wait until I left to start in earnest. I wordlessly grabbed my camera bag from under the line, a battered old canvas satchel, always ready, even at the end of a 12-hour shift. I didn't have another job lined up, but the lack of options was strangely liberating. Outside, Tokyo was waking up. The delivery bikes hummed and steam curled from the konbini vents. I walked east, the city slowly kindling to blue light, clutching my bag as if I had anything in it worth keeping. Behind my family's door, the silence was thick with expectation. My mother, who had always taken pride in quietly ignoring my dreams, poured tea without looking at me. My father barely glanced up from his newspaper. "You lost your job again," my mother whispered, careful not to wake my sister in the next room. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. "It's because you keep daydreaming about that camera, isn't it? You're not a kid anymore." I watched steam swirl in my teacup. A part of me wanted to shout, slam the table, tell them that the world was more than factory floors and timed breaks. That I'd found magic in light and shadow, that the city was singing for anyone who listened. But that would just sound pathetic, especially now. I swallowed cold and thick inside. "We can help you get a proper job," my father finally muttered. "One with security, enough of this foolishness." I left before the conversation could circle back to my failures. Out on the narrow street, I pressed my thumb along the ridges of my camera's body, my faithful Nikon, the only inheritance I wanted. The grief came in quiet waves, not for the job itself, but for that old, childish hope that someone close to me might believe I could do something bigger. Instead, the city itself was my confidant. In the small hours, I walked Tokyo. Shinjuku's neon haze at midnight, the crumbling edges of Sumida River walkways, the alleys painted with the melting lights of lantern bars. I took picture after picture, film and digital where I could, stolen scenes and the faces of strangers. I lived in borrowed moments. My hands shook sometimes with hunger when I lucked into temp work at ramen shops. But somehow, I kept shooting. My parents only saw the aimlessness, not the clarity that came to me when I pressed the shutter. Photos were never just photos for me, they were proof that the world was worth stopping for. Sometimes, when I caught a reflection on a rainy street or the flash of a foxtail in a crumbling shrine, for a breath, I felt like I belonged. But outside, the laughter was sharper and the warnings more frequent. "Yamada's at it again," my uncle harped at family dinners. "What are you photographing? The empty rice bowl." Even my sister joined, half serious, half protective smirk. "You're chasing ghosts, Oni-chan. Bills accumulated." My mother quietly handed me money for rent. I took it with gratitude and shame burning together in my chest. My world shrank to my lens, a world where no one else followed except the people I met fleetingly on the other side of my camera. Then one late spring evening, everything pivoted. I was dozing on the Yamanote line when my phone buzzed. An email, all in English, almost lost in my spam folder. A woman named Meredith, representing a European agency, had seen my portfolio online. "We are curating a Tokyo exhibition for Photo Resonate. I am struck by the emotional clarity of your street images. Would you consider submitting work for review?" It almost didn't seem real. I'd uploaded dozens of photos to anonymous sites, competing with millions, splashing into the digital void like coins thrown in a river. I stared at the email long after the train pulled into my neighborhood, knuckles white with disbelief. I replied. She wrote back, eager and kind. There were contracts and forms in impenetrable English. I spent nights sleeping between Google Translate and message boards, often close to giving up. But in the end, I sent 20 of my best photographs: riot police in Shibuya, a rain-soaked salaryman sleeping upright, lovers in a karaoke bar, and hoped. A month passed, no one at home knew. I returned to the factory once, working a single shift to cover groceries. I pretended not to hear my cousin's snort when he saw me in my grey uniform. Then, on a Tuesday heavy with clouds pressed low over the city, Meredith wrote again. They had accepted 7 of my photos for the Paris show, and one had been selected for the cover of the exhibition catalogue. My body tingled as I read her words. I let them flow over and through me. For the first time in years, I felt awake. The show was in September. I could not afford to fly to France, but the images would travel for me. There was a cash prize. More invitations followed, interviews with online journals, galleries in New York and Berlin requesting submissions. A Japanese magazine, Hito, ran a 2-page spread of my work focusing on the hidden Tokyo. I started getting offers to assist other photographers, shooting weddings and fashion behind the scenes, good money sometimes. Overnight, the work that had seemed pointless was being reinterpreted by strangers as art. My self-doubt didn't magically disappear, but I felt some small, bright anchor inside me. My uncle called the spread, saw my name in print. "Did you pay them to print this or what?" he sneered at the table. But my mother looked at the glossy paper for a long time, tracing a finger along one photograph, the blurry outline of a lost child in Ueno Park. She said nothing, but I caught the faintest shimmer of pride in her lowered eyes. For another year, I lived in constant motion, gallery installs, freelancing, the daily hustle. My photos sold on prints and postcards in trendy Ginza galleries. I was still uncertain, often broke, often scared, but I had for the first time charted my own route. 3 years passed since that final dawn on the factory floor. Success was not a clean, shining tide, but waves, sometimes grand, sometimes mean and whisper-thin. I sometimes caught old friends from grade school in a bar near my family's old home, and when they asked, "Are you still taking pictures?" I finally answered, "Yes." Professionally. It took me time to stop flinching at the mockery, even after it faded. Then, one early autumn, a new offer came through my website. The Tokyo Art Center was staging a retrospective on cities in transformation, and they wanted a solo exhibition of my street photography. At first I thought it must be a mistake. I met with the gallery director, a quiet woman with sea glass eyes who told me their curators were moved by the way I captured transition, tension, that I seemed to love Tokyo from the underground up. I stammered through the meeting, almost waiting for the punchline. I signed the contract, barely sleeping for weeks afterward. The opening would be in November. My photographs would fill the main exhibition hall, displayed for a month. On the night of the opening, the city seemed to pulse with wind and electricity. My mother fussed over my shirt collar, dabbing at invisible stains. My father put on his best suit and said nothing, eyes shadowed in a way I couldn't read. My uncle was late but said he'd come if he had time. My sister brought her university friends. I walked behind them to the art center, listening to their awkward small talk, jokes about world-famous Yamada and whether there'd be free sake. My own pulse hammered in my ears. Inside, the gallery lights were bright and severe. My name hung on a banner at the door, white on black, as if daring people not to notice. I hovered at the edge, shrinking as the room filled with unfamiliar faces, critics, artists, old professors, salarymen in neat ties. Jazz played low over the speakers. My photos formed a path around the room. The first image, dawn on the Sumida River, cranes looming over water. Next, Shinjuku Station at midnight, a man collapsing into a rain-soaked heap of magazines. Then the boy crying at the shrine, the woman in the red coat dozing against a market pillar. All of them scenes I'd stumbled upon, often dismissed as worthless by the world I'd left behind. People moved from photo to photo, whispering. My old foreman showed up, awkward in his working man's suit. He looked out of place amid the art crowd but wandered through slowly, pausing longest at a black and white shot. His own delivery truck, captured one snowy morning 3 winters before. He caught my eye and nodded. My family stood stiffly at the back, uncertain. My uncle was the loudest, making a great show of squinting at the price tags. 5,000 yen for a print, 10,000 for a signed one. "That's rent money," he grunted, but his voice was smaller than usual. A group of French tourists paused at my favorite photo, a mother lifting a toddler over a puddle, both faces blurred in motion. They pointed, excitedly quoting my name and the catalogue, then called over a gallery attendant for translation. My mother looked at me, eyes glossy. She didn't say she was proud. She just took my hand, pressed my palm between hers, and held it there for a long time. My father, usually unmovable, lingered at a photo of a day laborer walking into the mist. He didn't speak, but under the pointed silence I heard the softest sigh, a release maybe, not quite approval, but something like understanding. My sister chatted with her friends, taking selfies in front of the biggest print. For once there was no teasing. I noticed my old neighbor who'd once told me I'd wind up homeless at this rate consulting a gallery worker. She gestured toward a framed photo of her own neighborhood, same angle, same stooped persimmon tree, and asked quietly if she might buy it. Somewhere between cleaning the lenses, the sleepless nights editing, the condescension and mockery and near-constant anxiety, I had crossed the city's threshold. Not famous, not rich, but enough, not invisible. As the show wound down, a journalist approached, notebook out. "Yamada-san, can you speak to how rejection shaped your direction? Why did you keep photographing, after being told so often it was impossible?" I felt the old ache, but it was softer now. The grief, the despair of that first dawn walking out of the factory hadn't vanished, but turned instead to clarity, a memory folded neat. "I couldn't stop seeing," I said, surprised by my own steadiness. It was the only way I could be myself. The article ran in the national paper the next week. My photograph was on the front page of the arts section, with my parents' name and mine in print. My uncle clipped it and brought it to the family shrine, laying it beside the ancestral tablets. My father said nothing but poured me a cup of sake at dinner, and we drank together. The old streets had not changed. On New Year's morning, I walked through our neighborhood, past the same shrines and ramen stands, the laundry fluttering on wire lines. The city kept moving, humming with endless promise and disappointment. But after everything, I felt lighter, more rooted, not just as an outsider looking in, but as part of the city's bright, shifting story. When I passed the factory on my way home, the foreman waved. I raised my camera and he grinned, standing at the dock in the rising sun. I clicked the shutter, heart steady, framing the world through the lens I never let go. And in the click, grief and clarity, rejection and return, I found that I had at last come home.